their arrival, and smiled at the notion. His toupee was in a drawer close to the bed, but he had no substantial impulse to put it on and make sure that the noise was not anything other than his sister's preparations for their early start. For himself, he would have had everything packed and corded long before dinner if he was to start next day, except just a suit-case that would hold the apparatus of immediate necessities. But then dear Hermy and Ursy were so ramshackle in their ways. Sometime he would have bells put on all the shutters, as he had determined to do a month ago, and then no sort of noise would disturb him any more. The yoga class next morning was unusually to assemble at 10, since Peppino, who would not miss it for anything, was going to have a day's fishing in the happy stream that flowed into the Avon, and he wanted to be off by 11. Peppino had made great progress lately, and had certainly curious dizzy symptoms when he meditated which were highly satisfactory. Georgie breakfasted with his sisters at 8. They had enticed the motor out of him to convey them to Brinton, and when they were gone Foljambe informed him that the housemaid had a sore throat, and had not done the drawing-room. Foljambe herself would do it when she had cleaned the young ladies' rooms, there was a hint of scorn in this, upstairs, and so Georgie sat on the window-seat of the dining-room and thought how pleasant peace and quietness were. But just when it was time to start for the Hurst, in order to talk over the disclosures of the night before with Lucia before the class, and perhaps to frame some secretive policy which would obviate further exposure, he remembered that he had left his cigarette-case, the pretty straw one with the turquoise in the corner, in the drawing-room, and went to find it. The window was open, and apparently Foljambe had just come in to let fresh air into the atmosphere, which Hermy and Ursy had so uninterruptedly contaminated last night with their fags, as they called them. But his cigarette-case was not on the table where he thought he had left it. He looked around, and then stood rooted to the spot. His glass case of treasures was not only open, but empty. Gone was the Louis XVI snuff-box, gone was the miniature of Karl Huth, gone the piece of Bow china, and gone the Fabergé cigarette-case. Only the Queen Anne toy porringer was there, and in the absence of the others it looked to him, as no doubt it had looked to the burglar, indescribably insignificant. Georgie gave a little low wailing cry, but did not tear his hair for obvious reasons. Then he rang the bell 3 times in swift succession, which was the signal to Foljambe that even if she was in her bath she must come at once. In she came with one of Hermy's horrid woolen jerseys that had been left behind in her hand. "Yes, sir, what is it?" she asked, in an agitated manner, for never could she remember Georgie having rung the bell 3 times, except once when a fishbone had stuck in his throat, and once again when a note had announced to him that Piggy was going to call and hoped to find him alone. For answer Georgie pointed to the rifled treasure case. "Gone! Burgled!" he said. "Oh, my God!" At that supreme moment the telephone bell sounded. "See what it is," he said to Foljambe, and put the Queen Anne toy porringer in his pocket. She came hurrying back. "Mrs Lucas wants you to come round at once," she said. "I can't," said Georgie. "I must stop here and send for the police. Nothing must be moved." And he hastily replaced the toy porringer on the exact circle of pressed velvet where it had stood before. "Yes, sir," said Foljambe, but in another moment she returned. "She would be very much obliged if you would come at once," she said. "There's been a robbery in the house." "Well, tell her there's been one in mine," said George irritably. Then good nature mixed with furious curiosity came to his aid. "Wait here then, Foljambe, on this very spot," he said, "and see that nobody touches anything. I shall probably ring up the police from the Hurst. Admit them." In his agitation he put on his hat instead of going bareheaded, and was received by Lucia, who had clearly been looking out of the music-room window, at the door. She wore her teacher's robe. "Georgie," she said, quite forgetting to speak Italian in her greeting, "someone broke into Philip's safe last night and took £100 in banknotes. He had put them there only yesterday in order to pay in cash for that cob, and my Roman pearls." Georgie felt a certain pride of achievement. "I've been burgled too," he said. "My Louis XVI snuff-box is worth more than that." And there's the piece of Bow china and the cigarette case and the Carl Huth as well." "My dear, come inside," she said. "It's a gang, and I was feeling so peaceful and exalted. It will make a terrible atmosphere in the house. My Guru will be profoundly affected. An atmosphere where thieves have been will stifle him. He has often told me how he cannot stop in a house where there have been any wicked emotions at play. I must keep it from him. I cannot lose him." Lucia had sunk down on a spacious Elizabethan settle in the hall. The humorous spider mocked them from the window, the humorous stone fruit from the plate beside the potpourri bowl. Even as she repeated, "I cannot lose him," again, a tremendous rap came on the front door, and Georgie, at a sign from his queen, admitted Mrs Quantock. "Robert and I have been burgled," she said. "4 silver spoons, thank God most of our things are plate, 8 silver forks, and a Georgian tankard. I could have spared all but the last." A faint sigh of relief escaped Lucia. If the foul atmosphere of thieves permeated Daisy's house too, there was no great danger that her Guru would go back there. She instantly became sublime. "Peace," she said. "Let us have our class first, for it is 10 already, and not let any thought of revenge or evil spoil that for us. If I sent for the police now, I could not concentrate. I will not tell my Guru what has happened to any of us. But for poor Peppino's sake I will ask him to give us rather a short lesson. I feel completely calm. Om." Vague nightmare images began to take shape in George's mind, unworthy suspicions based on his sister's information the evening before. But with Foljambe keeping guard over the Queen Anne porringer, there was nothing more to fear, and he followed Lucia, her silver cord with tassels gently swinging as she moved, to the smoking parlour, where Peppino was already sitting on the floor and breathing in a rather more agitated manner than was usual with the advanced class. There were fresh flowers on the table, and the scented morning breeze blew in from the garden. According to custom, they all sat down and waited, getting calmer and more peaceful every moment. Soon there would be the tapping of slippered heels on the walk of broken paving stones outside, and for the time they would forget all these disturbances. But they were all rather glad that Lucia was to ask the Guru to give them a shorter lesson than usual. They waited. Presently the hands of the Cromwellian timepiece, which was the nearest approach to an Elizabethan clock that Lucia had been able at present to obtain, pointed to 10:15. "My Guru is a little late," said she. 2 minutes afterwards Peppino sneezed. 2 minutes after that Daisy spoke, using irony. "Would it not be well to see what has happened to your Guru, dear?" she asked. "Have you seen your Guru this morning?" "No, dear," said Lucia, not opening her eyes, for she was concentrating. "He always meditates before a class." "So do I," said Daisy, "but I have meditated long enough." "Hush," said Lucia, "he is coming." That proved to be a false alarm, for it was nothing but Lucia's Persian cat, who had a quarrel with some dead laurel leaves. Lucia rose. "I don't like to interrupt him," she said, "but time is getting on." She left the smoking parlour with the slow, supple walk that she adopted when she wore her teacher's robes. Before many seconds had passed, she came back more quickly and with no suppleness. "His door is locked," she said, "and there's no key in it." "Did you look through the keyhole, Lucia mia?" asked Mrs Quantock with irrepressible irony. Naturally Lucia disregarded this. "I knocked," she said, "and there was no reply. I said, 'Master, we are waiting,' and he didn't answer." Suddenly Georgie spoke as with the report of a cork flying out of a bottle. "My sisters told me last night that he was the curry cook at the Calcutta restaurant," he said. "They recognized him, and they thought he recognized them. He comes from Madras, and is no more a Brahmin than Foljambe." Peppino bounded to his feet. "What?" he said. "Let's get a poker and break in the door. I believe he's gone, and I believe he's the burglar. Ring for the police." "Curry cook, is he?" said Daisy. "Robert and I were right after all. We knew what your Guru was best fitted for, dear Lucia. But then, of course,